Hello. So, today I will be presenting on obsessive compulsive disorder. My client's name is Antonia Watson, and that is spelled Antonia Watson, and she is 38 years old. My name is Dr. Melissa Lear, and that's spelled Melissalear. So we have one differential diagnosis for Antonia Watson, and that is obsessive compulsive disorder, otherwise known as OCD. Also, we have three primary diagnostic features. So the first one is obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors which are distressing to the person. We'll repeat that again. Obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors which are distressing to the person. The second diagnostic feature is inability to control obsessions and compulsions. Again, that's inability to control obsessions and compulsions. The third diagnostic feature is obsessions and compulsions serve the purpose of lowering anxiety levels. Again, that's obsessions and compulsions serve the purpose of lowering anxiety levels. Okay, and OCD was ruled in because Antonia met all of the diagnostic criteria. Alrighty, so the client's story. So Antonia Watson, she is a 38-year-old associate professor at a university, and she has a 5-year history of repeatedly grading and regrading papers and regrading her TA's papers and retracing her driving route, and she also has really persistent thoughts about harm coming to her daughter. And she also has excessive concerns about her own health as well. So Antonia is a real checker. She checks everything, and she is convinced, even if she's convinced that everything's okay, she still checks it. She has immediate doubts as she goes through the checking process until she feels this internal tension, and she'll check and check and check until the internal tension finally dissipates. Once she leaves her house to go to work, she often retraces her driving path several times to make sure that she hasn't run anyone over with her car. So that's pretty worrisome that she would have to even think about the fact that she would run someone over and not realize it. So yeah, she's checking everything. She's has a lot of doubts. She has a lot of anxiety feelings. She also admits that her concerns are now significantly impacting her work and getting her work done in a timely manner. And also her student evaluations have been really negative, and she doesn't want all the negative feedback and her work being slow and just not really good. She doesn't want it to affect her chances of becoming a full-time professor. She also admits that her fear is unrealistic. She says that it's almost impossible for her not to engage in these compulsions without becoming excessively anxious and scared. So, sorry, my phone is freaking out over in the corner. So yeah, it's really interesting that she realizes that her fear is unrealistic, but yet she doesn't think it's possible for her to engage in these compulsions because the compulsions and the obsessive behaviors are what make her calm and they settle her. So she also has obsessive prayers that she does. She prays for her daughter all the time because she thinks that some harm is going to come to her. But then she admits that if she doesn't say the prayers, that one day it would probably not be likely to affect her daughter's well-being. So she's doubting that her obsessive behaviors are actually even working, but yet she does them anyways because they make her feel better. So she's got a lot of interesting characteristics happening. She's also feels humiliated by seeking psychological help, but her husband has thought that maybe that would be a good idea for them. They're having some marital problems also because of this checking and really obsessive behaviors. So because she really loves and trusts her husband, she wants to be a good wife and to have things work out with work and everything. So she has agreed to go get help, which is a really big step. So Antonia obviously sees that that her obsessive compulsive behaviors are causing her inability to operate normally, and it's absolutely wonderful that her and her husband are seeking help. So that is the story of Antonia Watson. So for our multi-axial diagnosis, on axis 1 we have obsessive compulsive disorder. For axis 2 we have none. For axis 3, we have none. Axis 4, work difficulties. So axis 4 is work difficulties. Okay, and for axis 5, we've placed the GAF at a 65. The GAF is a 65. Okay, so theoretical perspectives. I'm sorry, but the first one is kind of long, and it's biological perspective. Okay, so I'm just going to read it really slow. So biological perspective. The client could have a genetic predisposition to the development of OCD. Again, the client could have a genetic predisposition to the development of OCD. Okay? The second one for biological perspective is neurotransmitter serotonin is in a deficit. So neurotransmitter serotonin is in a deficit. Okay? Also, dopamine is being secreted and brings about a pleasure response. So dopamine is being secreted and brings about a pleasure response. Okay, we also have higher levels of glutamate. Higher levels of glutamate, the most common neurotransmitter in the brain. The most common neurotransmitter in the brain. It is an excitatory neurotransmitter and plays an important role in learning and memory. So I'll just read that whole sentence again. Also, higher levels of glutamate, the most common neurotransmitter in the brain, is an excitatory neurotransmitter and plays an important role in learning and memory. Okay, next one. The elevated cortical activity results in increased levels of glutamate, which in turn further activates the cortical system, resulting in a positive feedback loop. Read that again. The elevated cortical activity results in increased levels of glutamate, which in turn further activates the cortical system, resulting in a positive feedback loop. Sorry, that's so long, I know. Okay, the positive feedback loop begins to run amok, resulting in repetitive compulsive behaviors found in people with OCD. So again, this positive feedback loop begins to run amok, resulting in the repetitive compulsive behaviors found in people with OCD. Alrighty, the last one for biological perspective is abnormal brain structures also play a role in the development of OCD. Abnormal brain structures play a role in the development of OCD. Okay. Individuals with OCD have elevated cortical cerebral blood flow, metabolism and activation, most consistently in prefrontal regions of the cerebral cortex. Again, that's individuals with OCD have elevated cortical cerebral blood flow, metabolism and activation, most consistently in prefrontal regions of the cerebral cortex. Okay, this increase in cortical activity results in increased levels of neurotransmitter glutamate. This increase in cortical activity results in increased levels of the neurotransmitter glutamate. Wow. Okay, so done with biological perspective. Sorry if that was fast. So moving on to behavioral perspective. It's not as long. So the first one is faulty learning experience of operant conditioning. These compulsions are a negative reinforcement, and the person seeks to remove the stimulus. So, faulty learning experience of operant conditioning. These compulsions are a negative reinforcement, and the person seeks to remove the stimulus. Okay, so the second one is when people with OCD engage in their compulsion, they become operantly conditioned. When people with OCD engage in their compulsion, they become operantly conditioned. The compulsion is negatively reinforced because anxiety levels decrease when the compulsion is satisfied, thus increasing the likelihood that individuals with OCD will use this coping strategy again when experiencing anxiety in the future. Okay, I'm just going to read that whole sentence again. When people with OCD engage in their compulsion, they become operantly conditioned. The compulsion is negatively reinforced because anxiety levels decrease when the compulsion is satisfied, thus increasing the likelihood that individuals with OCD will use this coping strategy again when experiencing anxiety in the future. Okay, so the very last one is cognitive perspective. Sorry for drinking tea, I'm totally sick. Okay, so cognitive perspective. We only have one. The person experiences irrational beliefs such as harm coming to her daughter and her house. Oh, I forgot to mention that. She also has irrational beliefs that her house is going to burn down, and she checks the hot iron and the coffee pot all the time. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So, I'll read cognitive perspective again. The person experiences irrational beliefs such as harm coming to her daughter and her house. She engages in compulsive behavior to rid of the negative feelings. Okay, so that is it for the case on obsessive compulsive disorder and Antonia Watson. All right, thank you very much, and goodbye.